Welcome, everybody, inside the coach's office. I'm your host, Dan Murphy, alongside my co host, Brian Barnes. And Brian, we're back on a Sunday night episode. And again, we got a doubleheader of guests. And before I introduce our first guest, Brian, how you doing? How was your weekend?
Good, man. Just got some workouts in, watched a lot of football. Just got done watching an exciting game. And if it wasn't for the Packers collapse yesterday, you and I would be perfect on our pick so far. But they've been good. It's been good football otherwise. So that's pretty positive. And I'm fired up about our guest tonight. It's going to be a little bit of a different. We're getting away from football talk a little bit, and we're doing some other things and on the field stuff. So this is going to be a fun night.
Yeah, and I think the two biggest stories locally, with the Lions being out, the NFL playoffs and obviously the college playoffs are big nationally, but locally, I think the two biggest stories probably revolve around the Tigers. So, really excited to bring on our first guest from the Detroit News. It's right here, Tony Paul. Tony, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Good, good. So let's get right into it, Tony. I think the biggest story nationally, or at least locally, excuse me, and I don't think it's gotten enough coverage, really for a while now, is the Tigers situation and really all the local teams situation with the broadcasting rights and with FanDuel Sports Network. And the Tigers, ended their contract this week with FanDuel Sports Network. And Tony, kind of give us the latest on what that situation is. Why did the Tigers do this now? Why didn't it happen, maybe at the end of the season? It seems kind of abrupt to do it here in the middle of January. The Tigers sit 2 months away from opening day, and they don't have a broadcasting partner.
Yeah, a couple things. One, this is a continued indictment on the state of the regional sports network industry, which has been a real big mess for the last several years, amid the trend of cord cutting, which cord cutting leads to advertising decline. Advertising decline leads to the amount of money that the RSNs can pay out in rights fees. And so that's where the financial issues come from with the RSNs, which is why they went through bankruptcy, which is why the Tigers and Wings and Pistons and dozens of other teams that are part of the FanDuel umbrella took rights fees cuts last year. This is the second year in a row, by the way. This isn't not unexpected. It's not unusual given the state of the industry. The Tigers they canceled their contract last year too. So did the Pistons and so did the Wings. Because of the whole bankruptcy thing, they wanted to protect themselves, because if you don't cancel these contracts and then the big umbrella company ends up back in bankruptcy, you're kind of stuck a little bit. So from the Tigers' perspective, canceling the contract before the parent company, which is Main Street Sports Group, which owns all these the FanDuel RSNs. If Main Street were to go back into bankruptcy, it might tie the Tigers in, give them a little less flexibility. Now they can have the flexibility to move on if that were to happen. So it wasn't unexpected, and it doesn't mean that they won't be back on FanDuel next year. What it does mean is that they will talk about renegotiating the deal with the RSN parent company, again, Main Street Sports Group, which owns, I think, a dozen or so, I'm not sure the exact number, of these RSNs that broadcast dozens of teams across Major League Baseball, the NHL, and the NBA. And so opting out basically gives them the flexibility where they can renegotiate and see what kind of rights deal they get for next year from FanDuel, or if FanDuel even exists, because FanDuel is saying they need to find a buyer or a majority owner to survive. So the Tigers, by opting out, they can, kind of go at their own pace, decide what they want to do. They can, renegotiate with FanDuel. They have, they have a head start on moving on if the FanDuel umbrella, the bubble bursts. But they're going to be on TV next year. That's the one thing I've been telling people. They're going to be the games are going to be available. They might just be in a streaming format, which is the most likely scenario. Major League Baseball has been preparing to take over the entire league for many years, and that's Rob Manfred's goal. He wants the whole league under the MLB media umbrella. So we're still ways away from that. But the Tigers, if the FanDuel thing bursts, which it could, We thought it might burst last year. It didn't. So we'll see. But if it does burst, they will probably go to MLB Media and be part of the MLB TV streaming app, which will be another monthly fee, which will probably be somewhere in line with what people pay now for the FanDuel, $20 a month or whatever, or if they get it on Amazon Prime. So the games are going to be available. It's just a matter of where. It's just the bottom line is that the RSN bubble has been bursting for a long time, to the point of, back in the heyday of RSNs, which wasn't that long ago. I remember when the Tigers were really good back in 14, 15, 16, 13. I mean, they were getting, by my knowledge, well over $50 million a year in rights fees. And the cable and the RSNs were making bank too. Last year, when they had to renegotiate as part of the bankruptcy, by my understanding, they took a significant hit on the rights fee, maybe more than half of what they were getting. And if they have to renegotiate again, it could be another significant hit. So there may come a point, even if the RSN bubble doesn't completely burst, that the Tigers decide it's just physically more feasible for them to go to the MLB Media umbrella, and they'll make more that way. I don't think they're at that point yet, but they've lost significant revenue stream over the last few years from their rights fee, and that is no small impact on the payroll of this team.
I guess my question would be, with the Tigers, especially in the position that they are now, they've had 2 straight playoff seasons. The ratings are way up. They're one of the higher rated teams in baseball. Couldn't they kind of sell their broadcasting rights around and try to sell it to the highest bidder, especially in a time now where streaming networks are trying? I mean, they're starving for content. Like the number 2 things: you need content, you need demand. And the Detroit Tigers baseball and their games, that feels like a high demand and a ton of content. It feels like they should be able to make bank if they just sell it around to the highest bidder. Is that not the case?
There's not a ton of options if you really think about it. You have these, as far as nationally or internationally, there's been talk about, the London streamer wants to get into baseball. So they were a potential buyer for Main Street, which again owns the FanDuel stable of networks. But that London streamer is not coming in to broadcast one team. They want a bunch. That streamer seems to be out of it. Now there's talk of Fubo, but they're not coming in for one team. So the Tigers by themselves don't have a ton of options outside of starting your own network, which is super expensive, which Chris Ilitch floated years ago. I think it's been almost 8 years now, where he first brought up the idea that maybe the Tigers and Wings could start their own network, but you haven't heard anything about that since 2019. Yeah. So I don't think that that's realistic, because I think you look at that and it's super expensive. And again, the industry for RSN is not what it was. Even if you start your own network, it's not what it was. So, you got economic issues there. So that's not really an option. You can go over the air, which, if you've noticed, the Tigers and the Wings have already done some over the air stuff the last couple of years. And the Pistons I've been told, are going to probably start doing some more over the air games as well. Problem is that, it would be great for fans if these games were broadcast all over the air, but the money's not anywhere close to what they would get from MLB Media or staying at FanDuel, if FanDuel exists. So you really don't have that many options when it comes down to it. It's not like there's another cable network in Detroit that you can go to, so they lack options. They don't lack options so much that they're not going to be on TV or streaming, because again, the MLB Media thing has been kind of preparing for this for a long, long time. And in Rob Manfred's perfect world, he'd like everybody under the same umbrella, so that eventually they could maybe orchestrate some big TV national boom, not quite like the NFL, obviously, but something more, uniform among all the teams. That's what his goal is. And he feels like if you get all 30 teams under that umbrella, eventually the money is going to be much bigger than it is now. So that's Rob Manfred's goal anyway. So there's just not a lot of other options besides doing that or starting your own network. And I think Chris Ilitch put out the comment about starting his own network before he looked at how much starting your own network could actually cost.
I long for the days of past sports and WDIV in the early to mid 80s, man, for sure. But a lot simpler times. But I'm glad you brought up the Rob Manfred's, like, you kind of think that's his ultimate goal. Would the NFL model be Major League Baseball's model, you think? And what would revenue sharing look like? Like, would it be similar to the NFL and pretty much everybody's on equal footing? Or is it still big market, small market? Like, what do you think that could turn into?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't think it's a different situation because the NFL model is totally national. Because the NFL has, 17 games a team, Major League Baseball, there's 162 games per team. So obviously, not every game is going to be available, to the masses, the mass market, over the air anyway. I can't see a world where it would be even revenue sharing, because if you're going to get all 30 teams on board, well, first of all, I think that's going to be very hard to do because you got the Yes Network, you got other cities and other baseball teams that do, Wrigley, you got other outlets that have their own network. So I don't know that you're going to get all 30 teams anyway, but say you get 25, 26 teams, if you're taking a team like the Dodgers, and you're going to try to sell them that they're going to get the same amount of money in TV rights as the Tampa Bay Rays, I don't think you're going to get the Dodgers. So I don't think it would be even revenue sharing, but I think they could come up with a formula where ratings matter, subscriptions matter, where the subscriptions are coming from the market, where the ad dollars are coming from in the market, and kind of just break it down like that. So I don't think it'd be exactly like the NFL where everyone kind of gets their own, the same check, and goes from there. But it'll be interesting to see how it works out because, Rob Manfred's really, while everyone's been freaking out about this for so long about, where am I going to be able to watch my team's games, and teams are scrambling to find a home. And Rob Manfred's been pretty even keel about it because I think in his master plan, if you will, this is kind of what he wants, is to get it eventually to get one big umbrella. And if you do that, you can kind of make it, make everything uniform and get more revenue. As it stands right now, there's not a ton of revenue there, at least, for the teams. It's a lot of revenue, but it's not what it is at the RSN level, even with the significant cuts that they've taken in the rights fees in recent years. But his objective is, if he gets all of these teams or most of them, then eventually those revenues will grow. So we'll see.
I mean, Dan, I don't know if you agree with us. Like, Dan and I think, like, Major League Baseball is at the best spot that we can think of in a long time. Like, just I mean, with a great World Series, and you're starting to see kind of superstar players kind of like be seen a little bit. Like, I don't think the MLB still does a great job marketing those guys, right? But we're still in, I feel like, such a good spot that it would be kind of an ample time to almost have Major League Baseball take over all the TV, like you're saying, and media, like you're saying. Like, now,
I think there's a good point to be made for that. Baseball is in a good spot. Now let's see how good a spot baseball's in next spring if they have a lockout in the extended period of time, because baseball doesn't learn these things. It happens like clockwork every couple decades, where they just don't get it. So we'll see what kind of shape they're in going forward after this season, with the collective bargaining agreement. But yeah, I mean, you're talking about attendance is pretty good, especially in a post-COVID world where there are so many entertainment options and people are so post-COVID, we kind of a lot of us, I'm guilty of this, have enjoyed more and more being at home than venturing out. And, I'd rather sit at home and watch the games on TV, and a lot of games. And but they've done okay with attendance, and the TV ratings are really good, and their revenues are record revenues. Every year they have record revenues. So, and they do have generational players, Shohei Ohtani, but the list goes on, Juan Soto. You just rattle them all off. They have more star players, and they do need to market them better. But the game's in a good place, and so I think he's looking at, if you can get all the teams or most of the teams under the umbrella, it'll help with those revenues. When you can expose advertisers to the entire country, that's always a good thing when you're trying to maximize your dollars. So, but again, we'll see where we stand next winter, because by all accounts, these two sides are ready to go to war again.
Well, you mentioned Manfred's plan of getting everything under one umbrella. Do you think it'll be more like kind of like a UFC situation where they kind of sold their entire catalog to Paramount and Paramount's like, this is the home of UFC now? Or is it going to be more where they're going to kind of branch off and it's going to be several different streaming networks where you got Apple TV's got Friday night, you got Peacock's got another night, and maybe Prime TV has another night where they kind of branch it off and sell pieces to all the different streaming networks, or would it all be bundled into one?
No, I can't imagine it would all be bundled into one. I think the majority of the access to the games will probably be under the MLB Media umbrella for, if I want to watch my 160 Tiger games a year, maybe 145 of them are going to be available on that. I think that's kind of the way it's going to be, but I think they're going to continue with the NBC thing. I mean, that's a big audience. NBC is getting into Sunday Night Baseball. They're taking over for ESPN starting this year. So NBC, Peacock, Roku, Apple, they all have their little pockets. I think there's some good money there for the league. So I don't think that they'd want that to go away. It's also good exposure for the league. But I think the majority of, the access is going to be similar to what it is now. It's like, if you had the FanDuel app or you had a FanDuel subscription, you're able to watch 145 games, Tiger games. I think that's going to continue even if it's under the MLB umbrella. I think it'll be very similar. It's going to be the similar broadcast crews. So I don't think a lot's going to really change. And so that's what I've been kind of telling people is kind of freak out. Like they're going to get their Tiger games.
You brought up the fact that this could be impacting, the kind of free agent spending. How much do you think that is a factor right now? Because I know Tiger fans are frustrated that they, haven't made that big splash move over the last couple of years or made that big trade deadline move. But more specifically, getting a big free agent, being a big hitter. And we saw Bregman sign a 5-year deal with the Cubs. That was kind of, talked about for the last year and a half as the Tigers potentially getting Bregman. Obviously, it's not going to happen now. How much do you think this whole streaming deal and this TV rights situation is affecting their spending?
Well, it's hard to say exactly because I don't know the exact numbers of the money they're losing. But let's say that they got back in the heyday more than $50 million a year, which I'm comfortable saying. I don't know how much more than $50 million a year, but that's a lot of money for a ball club for one revenue stream. Say they lost 50% of that under having to renegotiate last year because Main Street or the parent company of the RSN is coming out of bankruptcy. So say they had to settle for half that, so $25 million. I don't know if it's half that. I'm led to believe it's probably half or more. So let's say $25 million. Well, let's say they have to take another haircut this year if the FanDuel thing survives and they're going to do one more year, and say they lose another half of that to keep FanDuel alive. And then you're down to, say, $12.5 million. Well, in the span of 2 years, you've lost $37.5 million. Those are under approximate guess numbers. I don't know that I'm close, but I think it gives you an idea. So let's say they're losing $37 and $40 million over the last 2 years in that TV revenue. That's substantial. That's for any team, but especially a upper middle market team, lower big market team. We'll call them that. Tigers are not small market. They're not big market. So, but also you look at, all right, what is Chris Ilitch saying? What is Scott Harris saying? Well, Chris Ilitch said a couple of years ago that they would be able to, they would spend when the time was right, when they're a competitive team. Okay. Scott Harris said last year, we will spend when we're a competitive team. Well, they won the division in 2024. They really didn't go crazy with payroll last offseason when the first go around with FanDuel was happening. And then this offseason, with more uncertainty with FanDuel, they also haven't gone crazy. They've been very modest with their moves. I think Scott Harris has made 2 free agent signings of 2 years, of at least 2 years in his time with the Tigers. I think Kenta Maeda and Kyle Finnegan this offseason. Pretty sure it's just those 2. Not that bold. So I look at that and I say, well, you have an owner and you have a president who say when the time is right, you're going to spend. And then you have a team that made the playoffs and won a playoff series in 24, made the playoffs and won a playoff series in 25, and still haven't really gone crazy. They're spending. I mean, they're not bottom payroll. They're middle of the pack, maybe slightly below middle of the pack. but they're certainly not spending like I think Tiger fans were led to believe. And if you go by that, and then you look at, well, here's a revenue stream that's being cut off significantly, you have to wonder if the two are at all related. And I think there's a chance they could be.
Well, do you remember back in the day, Mike Ilitch, he said something similar about the Tigers, like he would spend kind of similar when the time is right. But the knock on him was always the thought that he put all the money into the Red Wings, right, and not the Tigers. And so I don't know if there's any parallels to that today or to more what you're saying, like with the revenue situation. But I also kind of think, and Dan and I have talked about this a lot, that like we think Scott Harris recognizes that his championship core is still in like 27, 28, or 29 with all those young guys. And we're kind of thinking that's all as much the motivator is not going for that, because are they really one big free agent signing away from making them the favorite? Maybe like we don't know.
Well, first of all, they are the favorite in the division, a heavy favorite in the division. They're the only team with minus odds to win the AL Central. I would say this. My light just flickered. But I would say this with Mike Ilitch. I just want to touch on that really quick. When did Mike Ilitch start spending?
Really wasn't it? I don't think until like Dave Dombrowski, right?
It was
So
after
American League record for losses.
Yeah. It was after Comerica Park. He pushed for years to move out of Tiger Stadium to go to Comerica Park to get that revenue stream, right? That was a big thing, was getting the revenue stream of Comerica Park. We need suites. We need luxury seats. We need to move out of Tiger Stadium. And, remember that first year, they offered Juan Gonzalez a huge contract in 2000. Thank God he didn't take it, but they offered it to him. He started spending 2002, 2003 off season when he was 2003, 2004 when they got Pudge, and then the next off season they got Maglio, and then the next off season they got Kenny Rogers, Todd Jones, and they filled in some pieces. But that's when he really started spending. And then when they won, he spent big, really big. So he was looking for that revenue stream too. The Tigers revenue stream, that one's been cut off a little bit. So they're still getting millions, don't get me wrong, but they're not getting what they were back in the heyday of the RSN before COVID. So as far as your point about, does he see the core as being 2027, 2028, and are they one player away? I would make an argument that the biggest non-move they made last year wasn't at the deadline. It was that they didn't sign Alex Bregman before the season. I think he would have been a massive one big star player for this team. And they stuck at 171 million. They wouldn't go above that. 171, by the way, for 6 years, which Bregman just got 175 for 5 years, which Scott Boras got Bregman over 6 years. Really, he got him $215 million. So Scott Boras won, as he tends to do.
Shocking. Yeah.
By the way, he's also Tarek Skubel's agent, and
right.
Arbitration, and so we'll see about that. But I would argue that was the big non-move for the Tigers. I think that they could have been one player away from playing in a World Series last year. I have no doubt about that. And I think the same could hold true this offseason. I just don't understand when you have the best pitcher on the planet, when you have a team capable of winning the division or making the playoffs, clearly capable of doing damage in the postseason, how you can't go for it now. And I'm not saying $300 million go for it, but I'm saying, AJ Hinch likes to say, when people ask him about signing a third baseman, he likes to say, well, our third baseman was an all-star last year. That's fine. Zach McKinstry was an all-star last year. Zach McKinstry's a fine ball player. He also had a 630 OPS in the second half. Right. And that's the reality. Yeah. What I've argued a long time with this team is I think they're in a weird spot in that I think Scott Harris likes all his players. And I get that, because if you look at their lineup and their offense, there's not a bad player on their offense. But I would also argue that there's not necessarily a great player.
Well, that's Dan and I talk about that a lot.
When do they make the decision that Riley Green's not good enough or Kerry Carpenter's not good enough. So we're going to go move on from them and we're going to upgrade there rather than sticking with this. Because what I tell people all the time is, or ask people, would Scott Harris trade Curtis Granderson in his prime like Dave Dombrowski did? I don't think so.
Yeah.
Would he trade Austin Jackson and pull him off the field during a game?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think so. And so I think they're in this weird spot where it's like we all talk about third base because that's the obvious hole. But it's like, could you not upgrade other places where you're pretty good, but you could be great?
Well, they have a lot of pretty good outfielders.
Yeah, like I don't feel like they're looking at that. I feel like they're like, checking a box. We got our guy there, we got our guy here, and there's not a bad one in the bunch. Not one. If you really go player by player. But I would argue there's probably not a great player. Dylan Dingler might be a great player. But I feel like they're just in that weird spot where it's kind of like they're stuck.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's fair.
Well, let's get into their offseason, Tony. You mentioned they didn't spend a ton of money or make a big splash move, but they kind of just brought back the team that was one hit away from going to the ALCS. And I wonder how much this impacted maybe what their decision-making was, because Flaherty takes the one-year player option, 1 year, $20 million. Gleyber Torres is a big one. They offered a qualifying offer to him, 1 year, $22 million. He accepts that. So that's two players at $44 million right there, $42 million. And then they re-signed Kyle Finnegan, 2 years, $19 million. And then they have the one guy outside the franchise that they bring in is veteran reliever Kenley Jansen at 1 year, $11 million. Just what are kind of your overall thoughts on this offseason and what they did with their moves?
It's a lot of what I think of when I think of the Tigers under Scott Harris is that it's been fine. Well, my sister's a teacher, and teachers like to use the word fine to basically disguise what they really feel, like it's fine. Everything's fine. And that's kind of what I feel about the Tigers. Like, it's not a disaster. It's not bad. I mean, look, their bullpen is going to be, it should be, we don't know. Bullpens are finicky, but the back end of the bullpen with Finnegan, Jansen, Will Vest, and Tyler Holden looks pretty good. You have to like that. Kenley Jansen, I like the signing because he's obviously still a useful pitcher, but there are some red flags. His strikeouts were down last year. I mean, that happens when you get to be his age. So you wonder, every time when I think of the Kenley Jansen thing, I think about Joe Nathan, right? Like Joe Nathan just dominated, especially against the Tigers, and then he comes to Detroit and it's a complete disaster at the end of his career. So I have some fears along those lines. But look, Finnegan back is fine. That's good. He's solid. Flaherty, I think, is a good pitcher when he's on, and a very mediocre pitcher when he's not. Gleyber Torres, I think, is a good ball player. Look, they've got a fine team going into next year. They got the favorite in the Central, and I think for good reason. Parker Meadows might come back and be really good. Matt Vierling could come back and be good. So if those two things happen, and then the guys who came back are good, and Kenley Jansen is good, then they'll be good. And if some things don't happen on that list, you might see some up and down like we saw this year, where they were a disaster for the last month of the season. So, they have more money to spend. At least we thought they did.
Yeah.
But we don't know exact numbers. We do know that they clearly weren't in on the Alex Bregman this time, like they were last year. We didn't hear anything along those lines.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's just because Zach McKinstry was an all-star in 2025. Like, I don't think that's the only reason. We don't hear much or anything about them being Bo Bichette, Kyle Tucker. Like, why can't Kyle Tucker be in the mix? Like, that's my point earlier. Kyle Tucker, okay, then you move on and you trade Riley Green or you trade Kerry Carpenter you upgrade massively. Like, why can't? But we don't hear about that. Yeah. So, you're putting a lot on the shoulders of Kevin McGonigal and Max Clark. And we've seen that not everyone is Mike Trout, who comes into the league and wins, wins batting titles and is a stud right from the get-go. And so they have the makings of a team that could be very good. And they have the makings of a team that could be very disappointing based on, a couple things go their way or go against them.
One of our listeners, Thomas, he put it in the chat. He thinks that the impending lockout is really impacting the Tigers' free agent moves. I guess my question, possibly like going back to what we're saying, right? But I don't know if it necessarily has impacted other teams, right? So I wonder why it feels exclusive to the Tigers then.
That's a fair question, and I would say that it hasn't impacted the Cubs. There are other teams Toronto, the White Sox,
right?
It hasn't impacted them, but Boston hasn't signed a major league free agent this offseason. And people in Boston are going, what the hell's going on? So maybe does it affect them? Look, it's a big deal, the lockout. Now, if they lock out the players and they lock out, it's not like they're going to be having to pay their salary for next year. They don't pay them when they're locked out. But do you want to go long-term commitments when you don't necessarily know the fiscal situation and the landscape for baseball beyond 2026? It's a fair question. I would also say that what's going to change fiscally with baseball? There's not going to be a salary cap. The baseball union is one of the most powerful unions on planet Earth. They have been for a long time. I just can't see a world where they give up that and the ownership gets that. I think there could end up being, more likely than that, there could be a floor, a minimum floor. And that benefits the players too.
For sure.
I can't say a salary cap. And so if I can't say a salary cap, what is the concern from teams? I don't know if that's, maybe every team is just looking at it differently, that they just don't want to be tied up while this whole thing is playing out because they could see it going on a while. That's fair. But as far as the fiscal issue, I can't imagine. Maybe the luxury tax comes down a little bit, maybe. But I can't imagine there's a hard cap in baseball ever. So I don't know. I think maybe some teams look at it differently than others. But clearly there are teams that are not doing. There are lots of aggressive teams. Philadelphia has been aggressive this offseason. But there's a lot, there's a lot of teams that aren't. And Boston is one, Detroit's another. And maybe it is. Maybe every team looks at it differently.
Well, Tony, before we let you go, you got to get into the Tarek Skubal situation, the arbitration. Tigers, Skubal asked for $32 million. Tigers came back with $19 million. Is this the case of the Tigers lowballing Skubal, or is this just simply business?
It could be both. Look, here's my take on it. And I have some people in Tiger universe that do not agree with me. They feel like the offer the Tigers put out there was fair. And look, maybe an arbitrator, if they has to choose, will choose the 19 million, closer to 19 than 32. I have my reasons why I don't think that's going. I don't think that's going to happen. But just from an optics standpoint, I feel like the record for arbitration deal for a pitcher is 19.75, which was David Price, which is a good comparison because he was a lefty. He won a Cy Young before he was arbitration eligible. He only won one, and not back-to-back years before he was arbitration eligible. And even his situation was with the Tigers. So that's a comparison everyone wants to make. My thing is why don't the Tigers just go over that? Get into the 20 million just for optics' sake. Just to kind of say, yeah, we think you should get the most ever for a pitcher in arbitration because you're the best pitcher on the planet, who, by the way, we'd like to sign long-term. Even if you aren't going to sign him long-term, you can at least sell it to your fans that This is what we think of him. We're going to give him the record rate. Instead, you come in at 19 million because it's around the David Price number. And everyone says, well, David Price, that's what he got. So that's what Skubal should get. David Price was 11 years ago. Let me tell you, the 4-year-old new car, I call it new, but 4-year-old car I have in the driveway was $10,000 cheaper 11 years ago than it was when I bought it. Like, inflation alone makes the David Price money worth $27 million. That's just inflation. But by the way, let's also acknowledge that David Price was a good pitcher. David Price was not Tarek Skubal. He did win a Cy Young, but the 2-year run-up, even 3 years, the 3-year run-up to Price getting that 19.75 has less total WAR than Tarek Skubal's had the last 2 years. That's the thing that makes this, it's really an unprecedented case, arbitration-wise. You got a 2-time Cy Young winner, back-to-back, best pitcher on the planet, and he's now, arbitrated. So from my perspective, I just feel like the Tigers could have, just at least from an optics perspective, put the offer in the 20s, just to say, we, of course, think you're the best ever to come through arbitration as a pitcher. We, of course, think you should get the record. Instead, they come in at 19, and it's just a bad look for me. Maybe an arbitrator thinks differently. If I'm looking at the two sides and I got to pick, am I going $1 over 25.5 million or $1 under 25.5 million? I understand that it's not free agency. These guys don't get as much as they get when they become a free agent. That's the point of arbitration. It's the last year of club control. But if I'm an arbitrator and I got to choose one or the other, I mean, if you will go by the, a lot of people in baseball go by the anthem that one WAR is worth $8 million. Well, Tarek Skubal is worth $48 million, 40, or more. And by the way, that's probably what he's going to get or close to it when he's a free agent next year. I'm not saying that he gets $50 million now, because it is the last year of arbitration. It is the last year of team control. But if I have to go $1 closer to 32 million or $1 closer to 19 million, I'm going 32. I just think it's, to me, even if you just use the David Price number and go by inflation alone, and the fact that Tarek Skubal is a much better pitcher than David Price was, I just think it's a win for them. Whereas I think you could have, if you're the Tigers, to try to come in, with this $19 million figure and try to save what you can, it may end up costing you $13 million.
Do you think though it's like the low ball, if you want to call it that? Like, do you think they think it's a foregone conclusion that they're not re-signing him?
Yes. I don't think there's any chance they re-sign him. I think that I get nothing along those lines. I don't see. Could they? They could. I mean, you could sign Tarek Skubal. You could have signed Shohei Ohtani. Like, these are generational players who make a big difference to the value of your franchise. But I don't think that they're a team that wants to tie up a pitcher for 10 years, especially one who's had some injury issues. But, my suggestion earlier in the offseason was that if they want to resign him, and I don't know if they do, because whenever Scott Harris is asked about Tarek Skubal, like, it just doesn't sound right. Like, to me, like, it's just like, I know he respects Tarek Skubal as a pitcher, as a player. I know he knows what he means to the team, but like, he was so adamant coming into, that end of season press conference about how, well, we're not one player. We're not one player. But you kind of are. I mean, if you really go by it, the Tigers' record when Tarek Skubal's pitching and the Tigers' record when Tarek Skubal's not pitching, they're a 500 team when he's pitching. They're a World Series contender, or when he's not pitching, they're a World Series contender when he is pitching. So it's okay to say what he means to our team. And Scott Harris went out of his way to kind of be like, well, we're not one player, we're a team. I don't get the sense that they really see a long-term marriage here. I thought there would be creative ways to do it if they wanted to. Overpay the hell out of him for 5 years rather than pay him, the big deal for 10 years. So that way you could overpay Skubal, he gets a ton of money now, and then he might be able to become a free agent one more time. I thought they could have maybe looked into something like that. But I just don't get the sense that it's going to happen. And I think that that's why there were trade talks going on at the winter meetings. And I think there have continued to be. I don't think he gets traded at this point, but I don't know. Like, I don't have anything to base this off of intel. I just listened to the comments from the leadership, and I know they know what Tarek School means to the franchise. I just don't know why they had such a hard time expressing that publicly. And I just don't get the sense that they do. I thought the end of season press conference was kind of weird when when he's like, we're more than one player. I get that. We know that. It's a baseball team. You're more than one player. But it's okay to say publicly and rave about what you have. Yeah. And I just haven't got the sense that they've gone out of their way to really do that. And maybe they're doing that because they know they're not going to sign him. And so they don't want to pump this guy up too much, and then have to let down the fans when they let him go.
Well, Tony, we can wrap it up with that. Really appreciate your time and coming on. A lot of great insights and some key stories involving the Detroit Tigers. Obviously, fans can find you with the Detroit News and Detroit News Online, but where can they find you on social media?
Yeah, social media, X, Twitter, whatever it is, Tony Paul 1984, and you can check me out there for all my insight on baseball and mid-major basketball.
Oh, you've a Detroit Tigers podcast as well, correct?
Yeah. Tigers Today podcast. It's been on hiatus since the Marathon Mariners game, but we will be coming back soon. We got Scott Harris with an open invitation to come on, and we're hopeful that happens. We'll see, but we usually get some decent guests and try to keep people entertained as best we can throughout the season. So hopefully we'll be firing that back up. Shoot, pitchers and catchers report in about a month from today, boys.
Yeah, let's go.
We'll be firing that up here in the next few weeks. So check us out there wherever you find your podcast. That's what they always say, right?
Yes.
Get your podcast wherever you get your podcast.
Yeah,
we'll do that.
Much like the Tigers baseball and MLB baseball, you can find them on so many different many different networks.
Over here. Yeah. Do some digging.
Awesome,
you can
Tony.
find us though. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Tony. Have a great night.
Appreciate it, Tony.
Thanks a lot. We'll do it again.
Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, Brian.
That was cool. Like I said at the top, like it's pretty cool to, we kind of talked about some off the field stuff that maybe the average fan doesn't think about, but he made some great points about. I thought it was really interesting when he talked about Mike Ilitch and how like he was waiting for that revenue stream going.
I had never thought about that before.
But that's a great point, and that was pretty cool to think about. And like as much as we as fans, it's not our money and our business. Like, why aren't they spending? Why aren't they doing this? Like, I guess we don't know what the Chris Ilitch and the Ilitch family financial, situation is. That can be kind of frustrating. What, like you said, and like what he said, he seems to think the Tigers are just one big bat away to really potentially you add Bo Bichette to that lineup or Alex Bregman, like they're the favorite in the AL. You could say that they're.
Well, he said it, and we talked about it a ton. When it happened, it was if they had signed Alex Bregman before the season, they get that one hit. They get that one hit to get to the ALCS.
They finish in
Maybe
first
it doesn't even go to game 5.
And I didn't talk about this. Like, they might finish in first place. Maybe they're hosting those home games against Cleveland, right, and getting that revenue. You know what I'm saying? Like,
maybe they have a bye week in the first round.
Maybe they have a bye. Like, there's all that, right? Yeah. That's a great point. But, great conversation.
Awesome. And we're about ready to bring out our next guest and discuss another team that might be, maybe one player away from making a championship run. That's the Detroit Pistons. And we're going to bring on here Sean Murphy from the Half Court Podcast. Sean, thanks so much for joining us.
Dan, thanks so much for having me, Coach. It's a pleasure to meet you as well. Excited to talk some basketball.
Likewise, means a lot. Thanks for spending the time with us tonight. We're excited.
Oh, absolutely. Anytime I have an opportunity to talk about a team that's having their best record since the latter half of the Bush administration. That's a pretty surreal thing to talk about.
So yeah, Sean, the Pistons, the number one team in the Eastern Conference, and they've kind of been number one, I think, since maybe the second week of the season. And they're just absolutely on a roll. And I want to start off with that. What do you think has been the biggest, development or the biggest changes in this team from last year?
Yeah, I've kind of asked JB Bickerstaff about this a couple times throughout the season, and the things that he's kind of said that he's noticed is the belief that they can and the intense attention to detail. I think specifically ever since you've seen JB Bickerstaff, come in with his staff and implement his culture and bring in the right veterans to teach these Pistons players how to win games. I mean, we're not far removed from this team, having a 28 game losing streak, having, back-to-back worst records in the history of the franchise. And for them to suddenly come in, with guys like Tobias Harris, who, has been a massive, role for this team and a massive proponent for this team off the court and more so on the court last season. You brought in guys like Tim Hardaway Jr., Malik Beasley, guys who have, played throughout the league and have won a lot of games and know what it takes, to win night in, night out. And I think, you've seen the Pistons, especially last year with that massive jump, you saw them learn what it takes to win games. And then I think especially going through that Knicks series and realizing how close it was to being a game 7. I mean, the refs make the proper whistle, it would have been a game 7. And that's before, you throw in a healthy Isaiah Stewart into the equation. And then, the Pistons think at that point it could be a lot different, right? So going into this year, knowing that they were so close, they could taste the blood of the Knicks, there was blood in the water and they were ready to pounce. There were just a couple of things that they had done differently. That series could potentially gone different ways. And so I think you see a team that knows exactly what it takes, that's starting to grow and mature and take that next step, mentally. And I think one of the biggest things you can even see is, last year, there were a lot of moments where the Pistons had a lot of intense moments between the whistle with other teams. Now, those intense moments are with each other, and they're talking about the details and the inner minutiae of the game. They're talking about defensive coverage. They're talking about making sure that they're coming out of the timeout, executing the play the right way. So I think the focus and the understanding of how much those little things really attribute to winning night in, night out are one of the big reasons why this team has a 75% win percentage.
If there's a flaw with this team going forward, right? Like what do you think that is? Like, to me, in the NBA, going back to, the 80s, it still comes down to, guys being able to make big shots, obviously at the end of the games, close game situations, right? And Cade Cunningham, they have that guy, even though he was a little bit turnover prone against the Knicks, and I'm not bashing him by any means, but I still think that's almost like the flaw, right? Like making sure they have the Mr. Big Shot, Chauncey Billups kind of thing. Is there anything else you think that should give fans concern, or maybe something coming up toward the NBA trade deadline that the Pistons might think about addressing?
I think the number one thing is shooting and how the spacing is affecting their offense in the context of the half court. Whenever this team's at their best is when they're forcing turnovers, when they're getting in transition and getting easy buckets by, teams having a disadvantage on the defensive end because they just turned the ball over just a minute ago, right? Even last night, when the Pistons played the Clippers, in the first half, they had 13 steals and they came out and were firing on all cylinders. The Clippers could hardly keep up. But then once the Pistons were no longer forcing the turnovers and it was slipped on the other end and there was the pressure to go and get a bucket, especially when you don't have a Cade Cunningham on the court, that's, especially tougher. But, one thing that Malik Beasley really did do for Cade and for other guys on that team last year is really, open up the court more and allow them to operate in more space. Whereas now, Duncan Robinson's still a really good 3-point shooter. It's just not nearly the same volume that you were getting from the efficiency standpoint with Malik Beasley last season. And so what you're seeing a lot of teams do is really crash the paint at high numbers. At times, they're sending all 5 of their defenders to the paint when someone's penetrating and trying to get to the cylinder. And a lot of times, the Pistons don't necessarily have an open shooter they can kick it to, that teams feel like they have to defend each and every possession consistently. And so when you talk about what's going to prevent the Pistons from potentially making it further into the postseason, especially as teams are able to, zero in on you from a matchup standpoint, I think that's the biggest glaring issue. And so I don't think the Pistons necessarily have to go and get another star player, because I think Cade Cunningham is as good of a player as you have in the East. I think you feel really good about his development. Jalen Duren's been awesome when healthy. I think you just need guys who can space the floor, especially with, how not super strong of an Eastern Conference this is. The Pistons are already as good as anyone in the league. You just need guys who can shoot. It's really that simple.
So you brought up Jalen Duren's health. Is health in general, like they seem to have guys like banged up here and there? Do you think that's something that is a concern for them, or is this more precautionary, at this point of the season?
Yeah, I think partially it's precautionary. With Jalen Duren, his ankles have been kind of something over his career that that can tend to pop up here and there. Isaiah Stewart, he was really out due to illness. And Cade Cunningham, I know he took a hard fall last week in the Cleveland game, kind of fell awkwardly on his wrist. I'm not overly concerned about that. I think part of it is you're kind of in the dog days of the season. It's kind of the middle of January, starting to get to that 40 game point. I also think the Pistons are at a point where they have a little bit of a luxury to allow guys to come in. And, one of the strengths of this team has been their depth. So if there's a couple nights where, they need to sit key guys, they're in a position where they can. So I don't think it's necessarily a massive issue at the moment. However, the reason why they might want to consider making a move at the deadline is once you get to the postseason, an injury could be more fatal to this team because of some of the deficiencies that they have in the offensive end.
You mentioned them, maybe they don't need to make a big move. But do you think the potential is there for them to possibly do that if something comes to fruition? Obviously, it always takes two to tango. You're going to need another team, to put players on the market. But it feels like you mentioned the Pistons' depth, and I think about guys like Ivy, who maybe he's a young player, could be a star, point guard for another team, is playing a backup role here. And then the 4 position with Tobias Harris. And Tobias Harris, I mentioned this on our Facebook page, like he's a nice player. I like Tobias Harris, but it feels like if there is a spot within their starting lineup that could improve, it would be the 4 position. So do you think there is maybe a potential to make a big move at the deadline?
Yeah, I would say if you're looking at the moves of like the Lauri Markkanen size or kind of like those like all NBA players, I don't necessarily know if there's going to be a whole lot of those guys available, on the market at this deadline. Really, the biggest name, that was seemingly available was Anthony Davis, but now, obviously things seem to have changed with his injury status. But I would say if you're looking at the ilks of like a Michael Porter Jr., like a PJ Washington, some of these teams where, their agenda might not be to really win games at that down the stretch of this season where you can go and make a move, because the Pistons do have like a $12 million trade exception, which essentially allows them to absorb the salary of a player with that exception. They also have, the expiring contracts of Tobias Harris. I'm sorry. So that's definitely a very tradable contract. And, someone who as much as has been, a very big, impact for this team off the court. To your point, he's in like year 15, 16 now. And, if there's a potential to go and get someone who can get you buckets and a more consistent mark, then I definitely think that's something that you have to look at. And, to your point with, with Jaden Ivey and why it would kind of make sense if they went and made a move of some regard is because they do have some decisions to make this summer with salary. It's not just Jaden Ivey's contract that's coming up. It's Jalen Duren's. They also have Asar Thompson, who they have to start really thinking about extension talks on. And then Ron Holland's contract is going to be here sooner than you think. And so, whenever you're making, especially with, how this new salary system in the NBA works, there's, the dreaded aprons that people talk about. What it really means is you have to be very tuned in to what your salary situation is, not just today, but in 2030, in 2031. You really have to make decisions for the now and for the future. And I think that's what, why Trajan's been so, calculated when it comes to those decisions.
And with, Jaden Ivey, I bring him up and, I'm a huge fan of Ivey since the moment they drafted him, but the emergence of Dennis Jenkins, I think allows for them to consider that, because they kind of have 3 point guards right now that have played very well. And when Jenkins stepped up, man, when Cade was out for a while, he just balled out, man. He absolutely balled out, and he's continued to play very well within his role. So if they were to move Ivy, I don't think anybody's going to be really feeling concerned about the backup point guard position with how Jenkins has played.
Well, the unfortunate reality with Jaden Ivey, because to your point, I've been a big proponent of his ever since he came in from the draft as well. Just his burst and athleticism that he had coming out of Purdue, with, combined with some of his ball skills, some of the flashes that we've seen. Like there's a lot to believe in there, especially if he's able to continue to get better, from some of the health ailments that he's, kind of gone through, especially that really gruesome leg injury, from a year ago. But I think the thing that's really unfortunate for him and, kind of difficult for the Pistons is not only is this not the same Jaden Ivey before the injury, this isn't the same Pistons before the injury.
Yeah.
I mean, when Jaden Ivey was in the lineup and even, that January 1st game against Orlando, that wasn't a Pistons team who, had deep aspirations beyond getting into the playoffs and see what happens. Their hopes were, let's break that 17-year playoff, losing streak and let's get a win on the board and then let's go from there. Whereas now this is a Pistons team that's looking at the Eastern Conference as wide open as it's ever been. You're starting to say the finals word and no one and people aren't laughing at you anymore. Like this is a radically different situation. And so with that, especially with like a young guard with Jaden Ivey, who again, as good as he's been at points, there's not that same, opportunity for him to make mistakes and feel out some of the cobwebs and shake off some of that rust, so to speak. So when you have guys like, Danis Jenkins, who you can bring in and sign at like a much cheaper deal than you can probably sign Jaden Ivey or what he's looking to get this summer, on top of the fact that you have a guy like Marcus Sasser, who he's even had some moments where he's shown some pop. I mean, I hate to say it, but in the limited moments we've seen of Danis and Marcus Sasser, I've seen more of a pop from those guys than I've seen Jaden Ivey thus far this season. And some of that might just be because of the rust, and some of that might just be, there's coming back from the injury physically, but there's also coming back mentally, and that's a battle in it of itself. But it also might just be the fact that this just might not be the best fit anymore.
Yeah.
I
go ahead, Brian.
No, I was going to say, I wanted to circle back really quick because you talked about JB Bickerstaff a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you talked about his attention to detail, and like, is that the attention to detail? Like, what else is there though that like is making this team go from what they were doing, like you mentioned, the long losing streak under Monty Williams? Like, how has he been? Because I mean, like obviously I'm a coach, I'm a big coach defender, man. Like I think like major difference maker, right? And then how is he like not the coach of the year front runner at this point? And I mean, should win it. I mean, you could argue he should have won it last year.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that, impresses me so much about JB is just that is a guy that isn't going to ask you to do anything that he wouldn't do for you 10 times over. He's someone who, like with Monty Williams, it's a very unfortunate situation. I still go back and forth and try to think of, like the best way to describe what happened in, with that situation. And I think the best way I can describe it is he was offered such a massive amount of money that he couldn't turn down, with a wife who was going through health issues and had the opportunity to get her taken care of and his family taken care of in such a way. And when he got there and realized his heart wasn't in it, it might've been too late. Whereas with JB Bickerstaff, there is never a single question of where his heart is at, where his mind's at, what his motivation is. And, I think the biggest thing is just you see the trust and, the appreciation that the players have for him. But also I think it's just such like a match made in heaven. It almost kind of like makes me go, how has a Bickerstaff not worked in Detroit up to this point? Like, how is this the first time a Bickerstaff is coached in the city of Detroit? Because it literally just feels like a match made in heaven. I mean, even his dad was a coach in the league for a super long time, and it just feels like, man, he would have made a lot of sense in Detroit. But anyways, I think it's such a, perfect blend of the culture and the style of play and the identity that JB brings, along with him, but also just the fact that you have the chemistry and the trust between him and Cade. I mean, whenever you hear those guys talk about each other, whenever you see them interact, like Cade couldn't speak higher of JB if he tried. JB couldn't speak higher of Cade if he tried. And when you have that level of trust and unity and like a match in style and attitude with your franchise player, with your coach, with your general manager, from the top down, I think that level of unity that the Pistons just haven't had in a long time is leading to a lot of this success. I mean, the biggest phrase in that last season of the Troy Weaver season, the number one thing I kept hearing was too many cooks in the kitchen. Whereas now the mission, the vision is all one from the top down.
Is there any concern with Bickerstaff in terms of as this team continues to grow and they make a run in the playoffs? Is there any concern that he might not be as great as a coach as he's been for this team and where they're at right now, that he might not be the guy that can be a championship caliber coach? I've been reminded of what, the Pistons did with Carlisle. They Carlisle had brought that going to work Pistons to a certain point. They let him go and they brought in Ray Brown. Could you potentially see that happening? Or do you think Bickerstaff is the coach of this team and he's going to be a coach of this team for a very long time?
I think on one hand, that's always entirely possible. It's one thing, to win a lot of games in the regular season as a coach. It's a whole other thing to win at a high level in the playoffs, as a coach. But at the same time, I think one of the things I would say is, JB's more than earned that opportunity to see that out in Detroit. And I think if you were to look at some of his previous stops, like especially in Cleveland, with how things kind of have gone ever since he's left, like Kenny Atkinson was, had a really good season, with them last year, kind of going back to your question of like why JB should be coach of the year. I mean, to me, it's mind boggling he didn't win last year. I personally think it's more impressive when you make a 30+ win jump with a historically bad team than to take a 50+ win team and make them a 60+ win team. But then also you look at the carried over success in the continual upward trajectory, which that's not a fluke. That's just been what JB Bickerstaff has done every single stop in his career. And even with like when he left Cleveland, like the article was already released before the game was even over, as far as like the hit piece on him from certain players within the Cleveland locker room. Whereas, here in Detroit, like I think there's, enough of a relationship and camaraderie and a unity in the way that they go about things that I think there is a leash to kind of see those things out. So whether or not he's going to be, that top championship level coach is remained to be seen. But I mean, to me, he checks a lot of the boxes in the sense of, he certainly has the command of his players. He has a very good attention to detail. He's focused on the right things and he has a lot of experience with him. So I think this is certainly going to be his best chance to prove that he can be a championship coach.
And it's funny with the coach of the year thing. We could have three in this town over the last 2 years. I think about Dan Campbell in 23 and 24 didn't win it. AJ Hinch with the Tigers and what they did in 24 with that amazing run. If you can't win it in that year and not win coach of the year, and then what Bickerstaff did last year, it's like none of these guys won an award. It's crazy, man, to think about. But
the thing that just boggles my mind is just the lack of consistency and the logic and the reasoning behind some of the awards that were being given out. Like last year with JB, like the narrative was like, yeah, as great of a jump as the Pistons had, you got to give it to the 60. You got to give it to the team with the best record. Whereas now the Pistons are the team with the best record. And people are like, oh, well, you got to give it to the underdog team you didn't expect in the Boston Celtics. It's like, what are you talking about? We've had a championship culture for years. Am I taking crazy pills?
These awards, the awards are just so. I mean, like you said, there's no consistency. Any of these leagues, man, there's no consistency.
Yeah, hey, Detroit versus everybody.
Yeah,
that's right.
I want to circle it thing.
Yeah, I want to circle it back, Sean, to Cade Cunningham, and we mentioned him a little bit, but man, he's really taken his game to a whole nother level this season. He's been great since the moment he came here, but this season, man, he really has stepped it up and playing at an MVP level. What do you see the most in his game from this point, or really kind of throughout his career, that has developed the most to put him to this point where he really feels like he's playing at an MVP caliber?
The biggest thing that stands out to me is the power that he plays with, like specifically like the physical strength. When he came into the league, one of the biggest questions, with his game was going to be how he was going to be able to create separation from his defenders, because it was never going to be with his speed. Like Cade's a good athlete, but compared to NBA athletes, he's not a world breaker. He's never going to be a speedster. Right. So the way that he's really learned to do so is in part his impeccable basketball IQ. I think you're really starting to see the game slow down. And even with some of the spacing issues that have, plagued him in the career, like in earlier stages of his career, you're starting to see him like continue to still be able to play through that. I think in part just the experience and the game slowing down for him has definitely helped. But also I just think the strength that he's built in his upper body and his ability to create separation, with his strength to bully through defenders, whether it be bigs, wings, guards, whoever is in front of his path. Like Cade can get to his spots and there's nothing you can do about it. And when you want to talk about like what makes you like a superstar is when you know just about exactly what that guy's looking to do, and he's still going to do it anyway. There's just about nothing you can do about it. He's getting to the line more. His playmaking and his assists are only going up while his turnovers are starting to stabilize. You look at some of the passing numbers. He's the best playmaker in basketball, not named Nikola Jokic, who's perhaps the greatest passer that we've ever seen in the game of basketball. And so the fact that you're seeing Cade already take a lot of these leaps, being 24 years old, he's really starting to become, that top level franchise scorer, getting like 27 plus points a game. But the other thing is, unlike a lot of these stars in the league, he takes the challenge on the defensive end too. And he does it really well. And he still gives you a lot of that offensive output. Like as much as we talk about the greatness of a guy like a Luka Doncic, there's a reason why Trae Young just got traded to the Wizards for pretty much nickels on the dollar, So I think when you look at a guy like Cade Cunningham, what makes him so dangerous is on top of the consistency, the vision, the IQ, everything he does offensively, the guy's a demon on the defensive end too. He is a complete basketball player.
So obviously you mentioned, we talked earlier, like the Pistons, you don't think need to like get that like big time number 2 guy at the deadline or anything like that. But besides Cade, then who would be the next guy who's potentially taking that final shot? Like obviously the ball is going to be in Cade's hands, right? Like in your opinion, who do you think then is going to be that guy who it's like, all right, he needs to step up then and score. He potentially needs to score at the end of the game.
Yeah, I think you're going to continue to need that high level of production that you've been getting from Jalen Duren all season. Like even just being able to, still continue to bully bigs in the paint and continue to get those lob looks, towards the end of games. Like whenever he's, I feel like whenever he's on his game versus off is like a lot of times you can notice whenever he's like, causing some offensive fouls, whether it be through, just hard screens or moving screens. Sometimes it's just, not always being mentally switched on. But I think, one of the big reasons why he's taken a big step has just been, you see the conditioning's up another level. You see his, his focus and attention to details a different level too. But I think, he's been essentially one of the big reasons why the lack of shooting hasn't mattered. And so when going into, like the postseason, whenever you're going into these close games, like you still need Duren to be able to go in and produce. And I think he's going to have to really get used to being higher up on these team scouting reports. And I think he can get some really exotic and weird looks this postseason that he might not necessarily have seen before. Another thing he can kind of struggle with too is there's kind of been times where if he has the ball low, kind of like under his waist or like kind of by his knees, like teams like Boston or a lot of these like really smart defensive teams, what they do is they hack at Duren before he can even get the ball up, above his head. And that's like been one of his big areas where, when he's not been able to affect the game, those have been little things as to why. And so I think if you're talking about like what the Pistons really need, if they're going to take that big step this year, they need Duren to be this Amari Stoudemire-like offensive player that he's been all throughout this season. Otherwise, they're going to wish they made a move.
As we start to head down, you mentioned we're kind of in the dog days of the season here, but as we start to head towards the playoffs, who are the teams that you think are the biggest threats? Because before this season, the East was kind of wide open because of the injuries to Boston, the injuries to Indiana. I looked at the Pistons and the Knicks. Like I felt before the season that they were headed for a showdown in the playoffs, whether that's in the second round or in the Eastern Conference Finals. And to see them match up last week and the Pistons just to take them down by 31. And I know there's some sports radio hosts in this town who don't think it's a big deal. And we talked about that on Twitter a little bit. We'll let them remain nameless.
Mike McDaniel an email. We got to celebrate that.
Yes. But the get back to it. We could. I think people know who we're talking about. So
sorry to throw you off there.
No, you're good. You're good. I'm always into bashing him a little bit. We'll just leave it at that. But yeah, so the Pistons, they beat the Knicks by 31. The Knicks were the second in the East at the time. And so where do you think that the big opponents are going to come from? Could it be Boston, getting healthy down the stretch and kind of getting it together? They already look like they're starting to get it together now. Is it the Knicks? Or is it another team that maybe people aren't talking about that could be a huge threat to the Pistons once we get to playoff time?
Yeah, if I were to say, if I were to rank like the three teams I don't want to see in the playoffs the most, like the Knicks are definitely probably still the strongest contender to the Pistons in the East, especially assuming that they're going to go and bolster up a bit at the deadline. They've been linked to guys like Jose Alvarado, who, I really like and I think would fix kind of a lot of their issues, especially on the defensive side of the court. Boston has been the highest overachiever this year, and they're still going to probably be getting Jason Tatum here back in the next month or two. Whether or not he's the Jason Tatum of old, I'm not entirely sure, but even if they get like a 70 to 80% Jason Tatum as like a second or third option, especially with how good they've already been, like that's still a really dangerous team. And to me, the team that's kind of been like the most pleasant surprise and a team that I really wouldn't want to see in the postseason, the Philadelphia 76ers are good, man. And, I've been as down on them as anyone over the last decade. Like if there's anyone that wants to take the opportunity to, just publicly on the 76ers, it's yours truly. But the truth of it is I just can't, because Tyrese Maxey is turning into prime Damian Lillard. VJ Edgecombe is one of the most electrifying rookies I've seen in a long time. And Joel Embiid's actually kind of figuring out a way to stay healthy and be productive in this new world where he's no longer the number one guy. And Paul George is essentially just turned into Sixers Tobias Harris, which, like, to be honest, for this team is kind of a good fit. So when you talk about teams like you don't necessarily want to see in the postseason, like I still think the Pistons are better. I still think they would win that series, but I'm telling you what, man, anything can happen in a 7-game series. And that's a team where, if things get scrappy, like those young guards are feisty as hell on both sides of the court, and they can both put up buckets with the best of them. So that's a team I'm really highlighting.
Well, assuming the Pistons, and we'll leave you with this. Assuming the Pistons don't make a big move, like we're assuming that no like Rasheed Wallace type 04 move coming down the line. Maybe they add a shooter here or there, maybe some backup guys, but no big moves. This is kind of the roster they have going into the playoffs. What do you think the ceiling is for this team for this season?
I mean, I still think this team can make the finals. Like even as constructed, whether or not they can win once they get there, like I just said, quite literally anything can happen. If there's anything we've seen over the last few weeks, the Thunder are certainly not, the Showtime Lakers like dynasty that people were, kind of propping them up to be. And so like, this is certainly still as wide open of a conference as we've seen. I personally think Cade's the best player in the conference, other than maybe Giannis when he's 100% healthy, but even then, that is becoming much more of a conversation than people might want to admit. So, I personally think the ceiling is still a finals. Maybe this is just me trying to temper expectations, but I still think an Eastern Conference Finals would be a massive success when you think about the fact that it's been 20 years since they've been, in that conversation. I know, growing up, I remember the conference finals just being the standard. And so to be able to get back there would just be a massive accomplishment. But if this team continues to execute at the level that they're playing, like if there's anything I firmly believe, whether it's basketball, whether it's football, just about any sport, like defense travels. And especially in this league, like you see a lot of teams who can live and die by the three, but when you have teams that live and die by what they do on the defensive end, to me, that travels in the mud and the rain and the snow and the sun, like wherever you're playing, defense, rules the day. So as long as the Pistons are still playing this level of defense and they can get guys who can still go out and get buckets, like I still think they're as good as anyone.
And you said something that should give Pistons fans hope. And I say this about, the NFL all the time. Like if you have the best player on the court, like you said, you think Cade's the best player in the Eastern Conference, like you're already ahead of everybody and you should feel good. Like you feel confident.
It's like having the franchise quarterback in football. It's like having the home run hitter in baseball. Like as long as you have that guy, you are in the conversation just about every year. And I think we have officially seen Cade enter the conversation as a top 5, top 10 player in the world.
And I think the one thing that I'm really excited about, Sean, and maybe it got close in the playoff run last year, but I don't think it quite got to the level. It's seeing LCA be that home court advantage like the Palace was in 04 and 05 in those years where they went to 6 straight Eastern Conference Finals. Like, you went into the Palace and you knew, man, it was gonna be hell. It was gonna be hell for whatever team that came in there. And I haven't seen LCA quite get to that level yet. And I think the last playoff round, it was a little bit, we were, as the fan base was just happy that we were there.
Were you at any of those games, Dan?
I personally was not. No.
Okay, I'll tell you. So I was at Game 3 and Game 6. I've been to quite a few Palace playoff games back in the day myself, and I guess I don't know if I would say if it's quite at that peak level yet either, but what I can tell you is I had a headache for almost 3 days after Game 3. It was that loud. Like, that building was insane. And so, it has certainly gotten back pretty far. And, again, I know we're in a world where we talk about championships and we focus so much on results. And, those are the number one things that people want. But like, when you talk about the ability to revitalize a fan base and what, in my opinion, is a sleeping giant in the NBA, like, that's something to hang your hat on.
Yeah, I feel like it's coming. I feel like we're in this era of Pistons basketball where we're going to see a lot of playoff games at LCA over the next several years, and it's incredibly exciting. I mean, it was a rough go for a long time. NBA basketball here in this city, and it feels that whole drought and that whole bad era is officially over now, and it's incredibly exciting. As a longtime Pistons fan myself, man, it's great to see. Sean, we'll wrap it up here. Where can fans find you? Where can they find your podcast, and where are you at on social media?
Yeah, I appreciate it. Main place you can find me, like 2 places are on X at Sean Half Court. That's where I do a lot of my, kind of real-time coverage, post any, pre or post game interviews, and, just any analysis real time. But also you can find me on, wherever you get your podcasts at From Half Court. Myself and my guy, Troy Sergey, go through and talk all things Pistons basketball, as well as the rest of the league. Just moved over to the Detroit area this week. So now that I'm here, I'm going to be ramping it up a lot more. So definitely be sure you're subscribed over there. But Dan, Coach, this is a lot of fun. Thanks for having me. And anytime you want to talk Pistons, let me know. I'm definitely down to come back on.
Absolutely, man. This was awesome.
Yeah, this is great.
Appreciate your time, man. Have a great night.
Thanks, all right, man. Appreciate you guys.
Thank you. You talked about right there at the end how, like, there was such a drought in interest in the Pistons, and like you felt like things weren't going right. The Jaden Ivey injury recently, and then 2023 when the Pistons should have gotten the first pick overall of Victor, they still picked Oscar Thompson, who's playing pretty well. But it is fun to see, because there were times, like, we remember growing up, and you don't remember this, but I remember the 89-90 Pistons were rocking, and then the 04 Pistons, right, were some of might be like a top 3 or 4 favorite teams of, like, my lifetime, just watching those guys. And so it is fun to watch right now.
Well, with Brian, we talk about it a lot, not so much on this podcast, but, privately in our own discussions, like, we hated where NBA basketball was for a while there. And it was just get down the floor as quickly as you can and shoot a 3. They never call traveling. There's no defense. There's no hustle. I would joke around. I remember being at a Pistons game several years ago, and my brother happened to call me, and it was halftime, and I'm talking to him, and he's like, wow, how's the game? I'm like, oh man, it's awesome, man. Guys are diving on the floor for loose balls, man. There's just so much energy. He's like, really? I'm like, no, absolutely not. Mm-hmm. Of course not. But now, like, this Pistons team, like, they're playing that way. Mm-hmm. Like, I know the scores are still, like, really high. They're still it's still not the NBA basketball that I'd love to see. But the Pistons are a different breed. Like, they're playing a different form of basketball than what you typically see in this era of NBA basketball. And I mean, they are getting on the floor for every loose ball. Yeah. They are playing with incredible defensive energy, and it's fun to watch, man.
Well, one of the we're not talking about load management, right? Like, we're watching. No, these guys get after it. And like one of the all-time Pistons that everybody loved was Dennis Rodman, right? Before he went, off the rails a little bit. You feel like there's a little bit of that. Like, he'd fit in to this team in this era of Pistons basketball.
Well, Isaiah Stewart to me is like kind of the face of all that, man. He just he takes no BS out of the court, man. He's ready to brawl with anybody, man. You want to talk about, Dennis Rodman fitting in with this team, a guy that would fit in with the bad boys, is Isaiah Stewart, man. But yeah, man, they're fun to watch right now. They're fun to watch, but we do head into the dog days, and I remember this point last year too with the Pistons. It's like right now they're first. Last year it was like they were fifth or sixth, and they just kind of sat in that spot all the way to the playoffs. And I'm already to the point where I'm kind of like, I'm ready for the playoffs to get
for sure,
especially after that Knicks game last week. And I hate to say it, but I think the Knicks kind of took that off a little bit. After the Pistons got a decent lead, they kind of felt like they took that off a little bit because it's just it's a game in January. Unfortunately, I hate to say that.
And the interesting thing about the NBA playoffs is there's always a comparison between like what's better, like a 7-game series, or like the NCAA basketball tournament, right? And there's pluses and minuses of both, you could argue. But one of the cool things about the NBA playoffs is like it's all about matchups, right? And it's all about how coaches from game to game like manipulate their game plan, right, to find that matchup and how it works and stuff like that. And that's an interesting thing in basketball in the NBA that I think
that's what I brought up Bickerstaff, because it's a little bit easier, when you bring in a team and they just, this is their third game in 4 nights, and you're a team that's playing with that type of energy night in, night out. But once you get into the playoffs and you're playing that one team for 7 games, it becomes really about game plans and X's and O's, and it's it's a different type of basketball once you get in the playoffs, and you really see who the top coaches are once you get in the playoffs. So that's kind of where my question with Bickerstaff comes, because I love his style. I love how he's always fighting for his guys, and he's always defending his guys. Like, I love all that. I love everything he's bringing, but I think there will come a point with this team where there's going to be that question, if they have some tough series, or you get to a certain point and we get a couple years down the road and they haven't gotten the NBA title. You have the best one of, if not the best players in the league in Cade Cunningham. I think there will come a point where there'll be some questions about Bickerstaff and whether he's the guy that can get him over the hump. But let's just get to that hump first, Right. Let's just get there first, and then we'll start asking those questions.
For sure. No doubt about it, man. It's a good time to be a Piston fan.
So, Brian, before we log off, and we don't have to get into this too in depth, but I just want to get your quick thoughts on the playoffs, and more specifically, the Bears-Packers game last night, because I think that game is the one that resonates most locally, the NFC North battle. And, I texted you at halftime. I'm like, we were right. Bears are frauds. They're down 21-3 at halftime. And then the Packers, man, 21-3 halftime lead, 15-point fourth quarter lead, and they blow it. They blow it again to the same team in the same stadium that they just blew the division a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I know.
There's got to be certain questions about LaFleur at this point.
Well, I sent you a text right after the game. I said, if he's gone, is he a candidate to be the Lions offensive coordinator? Because like this is something like, yes, he could theoretically be a head coach candidate, but like he's a little bit different than Mike McDaniel and Kevin Stefanski. Like LaFleur has blown leads, and there's been games where the game management and his style and his play calling has been in question, right? Typically those are, when that happens, and I think you brought it up the last time we talked, those are guys like that owners stay away from until they kind of like fix that reputation a little bit as an OC. So I wonder, like, and there's a lot going on with like, I don't know where I saw like the Packers president of operations, like somebody somehow has a tie to John Harbaugh, right? So are the Packers going to go after John Harbaugh, right? So there's a lot to that, man. And that's a problem. And like Jordan Love is still a quote unquote young quarterback. And I thought he handled things pretty well. He seemed really calm and stuff. But again, he didn't close it out either. Where Caleb Williams is quirky and as goofy and as fire as he is, man, he made some plays. And
he made, I think it was on a
awesome.
fourth down.
DJ Moore
threw it kind of off his back.
Oh, that one, yeah.
And just threw it out. It was perfect.
Yeah.
It was perfect pass that he threw, just followed back. I've never seen a throw like that. It was unbelievable. And I'm one of the biggest Caleb Williams haters in the world, going back to his, FUCK ND, FUCK Utah, and his fingernails and that back in college. Like that, all that stuff just rubbed me the wrong way, man, with that kid. But he balled out last night when it absolutely was needed, man.
Scary as a Lions fan, isn't it? Like, I go back to it, man. It is a quarterback-driven league, and I think by talent, like he's the best in the division. He just is as the quarterback. And so that we can have this argument as much as you want, but he was throwing he was ripping it when it mattered. And like people are going to say,
like he's just scratching the surface.
Yes. And but the Lions beat him twice. Like, who gives a what? Like whatever. Like the Bears were doesn't matter, man. Doesn't matter.
They're going to be hosting the second round playoff game.
They're going to be hosting a second round playoff game. Yep. So yeah. It was fascinating. I was watching 49ers Eagles, and there was a fourth down call by the Eagles had a fourth down, and I'm sitting there thinking like, gosh, like think of all the drama. What could come from this? Like the 49ers, did they move on from Brock Purdy? Probably not. But I'm just like what are all the different angles here? Like it's just there's a lot of drama. Playoffs, man.
It's funny that the 49ers game, I was laughing because I had just seen a Facebook post, and it was like one of those deals where the algorithm, so it's not like you don't see the most recent. Sometimes you see stuff from like the night before and that. Sure. So somebody's talking about the Bears, and it must have been when they were losing. They said, maybe Ben Johnson should call a reverse to the second receiver and have him throw a pass. It couldn't have been 2 minutes later that the 49ers run the reverse pass, which won Jennings to Christian McCaffrey to score the touchdown, which was just a huge play of that game. And it just goes to show you, man, like, sometimes it's just how the game, the cookie crumbles sometimes, man. It's, it's that plays in every team's playbook. Sometimes you just call it and it's just the defense covers it. And sometimes the defender falls asleep and the guy gets free. Like you never know.
Well, the quick screen and go winning touchdown the Bears had to DJ Moore was like that, right? I mean, the corners jump on the quick screen, the smoke screen, right? And you're able to get behind them. I mean, you're right. There is, fatigue comes into play, and the mental fatigue, and all those guys really, focused in on their keys. Or that's those little things are typically what's the difference between the championship teams and the teams that are at home.
Well, and it is funny when you look at the NFC playoffs, right? What did we talk about in the preseason, all season? The two teams that are going to be the problem for the Lions in the division, it's going to be the Packers, and in the overall NFC, it's going to be the Eagles. Yeah. All three are sitting at home now. You just don't know, man. You never know one season to the next.
And to your point, just get in, and who knows everything. It's so close. Like it's so close.
And before we log off here, final thoughts. College football, Indiana, Miami. Indiana. What can you say? They're just demolishing teams. They're just embarrassing teams out there.
It's college football right now, and it's been like that the last few national championships. I'm not taking anything away from Curt Cignetti or Indiana. Like they are rocking. It is good for college football that Indiana is, doing this right. That being said, like they never would be like this without NIL transfer and all these guys.
Of course,
right? So it's cool to watch. Although part of me is still like there are some reservations to it because Indiana's 23 years old, right?
Every team has an opportunity, though.
They
right?
do.
Every team has that opportunity.
I do.
There's plenty of universities that have had more NIL money, more prestige, all that stuff to go out and get these guys. Indiana brought these guys in.
I think what's just as interesting, and it goes against what you and I believe, and we talk about like things were better before the playoff. And I think I sent you this text too. Like Miami is the perfect team for this current playoff system. Right? Because they're a team that's gotten hot at the end. They had a couple close, fluky losses. And Nick Saban said it, like they're extremely talented. Like nobody's going to want to play these guys. Like they're the perfect college football playoff team, like right now. Do I think they're going to beat Indiana? I don't. But like they're that type of team when people say, hey, we need a playoff, they're the team you're talking about.
Well, it's funny. If Miami does end up beating Indiana, I don't think they will. I think this is going to be a close game, though. I think it's going to be a lot closer game than people are thinking. But I do think Indiana is going to win. But if Miami does end up winning this game, you could look back at week one as really that Miami won the national titles because they beat Notre Dame. Yeah. Had they not beaten Notre Dame, it would be Notre Dame potentially in this position right now. But it goes to show you that, hey, we talk about the regular season not mattering and, at least not mattering as much as it used to. Miami ends up winning it. we could look back at week 1. It's like, yeah, that actually did really matter.
But by the way, we're getting a comment pretty funny from my buddy Craig. He's a Hoosier fan, and he said he'll play Carson Beck all the time. Like I did. It was funny. Carson Beck had a huge drive, and one of our buddies sent us a text about that, and he's a little younger than us. I'm like, yeah, well, the dude's your age. You know what I'm saying? I was oversimplifying it. Like our buddy, it's 27, 28. So no, but still, yeah. Like Indiana's better. Like it's pretty neat that the game is in Miami. That adds some intrigue to it.
I
still think, okay, what's your definition of close? I think whatever the spread is, I haven't seen it. I think Indiana covers. I do. Like I think they're physically they're better.
I thought it was 8. I think it was Indiana by 8.
I would take the Hoosiers.
Yeah, I think it's going to be close, man. I think
so. So we're going to have.
I think it's going to be 3 or 4 points.
Oh, we need to have.
Miami's defense is good, man. I think Miami's defense is going to give Indiana problems. I think this is going to be a game similar to Indiana-Iowa was earlier in the year. It was a low-scoring game, and it was a slog. Indiana really kind of struggled offensively. I think it could be a game like that. As Steve Simek just said, it was at 7. It's at 7. So I think initially it might have been 8, and it's come down to 7.
37.
So yeah, maybe the people are starting to bet Miami. Like I think it's going to be. Yeah. I think it's going to be close.
37.
We might have to put a little wager on it.
We're gonna. So like not
maybe launch or something.
So let's do. Yeah, we'll do our next show because I think then they play the following.
You play Monday night, yeah. So we'll do a little bit of a college football preview next week.
We could do a full game preview if you want. I mean, we can have some fun.
Maybe we can bring somebody out for that. We'll see.
I'm down. We'll get a guest on. I'm down.
Absolutely. All right, Brian. Well, we can wrap it up. Any final thoughts? I mean, we had two awesome guests tonight, man.
Love it. I love it when we get guests, man. Those guys are fun and bring different perspectives and not just you and I. Sometimes we like to give our listeners other voices to listen to who are a little smarter than us. So it was good.
Yes, definitely good. Yes, yeah. I would say Tony's a yes. Definitely a little smarter than us.
Both guys tonight were great.
Absolutely.
They were great.
Awesome show tonight. And for that, we'll wrap it up. For Brian Barnes, I'm Dan Murphy, and we'll see you next week.